Oh, it's a good time to be selling nickel. You're listening to Kitco Roundtable. I'm your host, Michael McCrae. Kitco correspondent Paul Harris is in. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Michael. Good afternoon.
I want to remind listeners that editor Niels Christensen has spun off his own show to talk macro. Guests have been great. The show has been great. Name of show still to be determined. Look for a show to drop into the feed early each week. It will be getting its own place soon. With us is living legend. He has been behind some of the Yukon's biggest discoveries, and he helped kick off one of the hottest new exploration regions, Newfoundland. It's prospector Shawn Ryan. Hi, Shawn.
Hello. Thanks for being here.
Shawn, later in the podcast, we have to get up to date with what is happening in the Newfoundland and help sort us out with all of the major players. I was talking to you before this podcast. You always have a lot of projects going on. Tell us what's the most exciting thing that you're working on right now.
Right now, this week, we announced white gold out of the Yukon, actually announced a pretty hot hole, almost 20 meters of just shy of 7 grams. And it's a nice new discovery because it brought the high grade into the project, and it actually opened up a whole new trend. It's almost 6.5 kilometers. So from a prospecting point of view and potential, it's going to be a fun place to play there this summer.
Terrific. Let's turn to macro. The key 1800 price range continues to be a magnet for gold, writes contributor David Erfley for Kitco. After the U.S. jobs report came out much better than expected a week ago Friday, gold dived to 1780. Gold recovered this week despite a 52-week high being made in the US 10 Treasury yields. The yellow metal also shook off hotter than expected inflation news midweek, and the momentum is building for Fed tightening. As of recording at noon Eastern time, spot gold is above $18.30 an ounce. Copper finished up sprockly this week too, finishing above $4.60 a pound, benefiting from hot Asian markets and declining metal inventories. Paul, Newmont made a big acquisition this week.
Yes, a very good week for news. For me, the best one was Newmont buying the 43.65% stake in the Yanacocha mine in Cajamarca in Peru, which is owned by its debt burden partner, Buenaventura, with additional contingent payments of up to $100 million tied to the future increases in metals prices. Newmont is set to make a funding decision on the $2 billion Yanacocha sulfides project mid-year, which is due to produce some 500,000 ounces a year in gold equivalent 2024-2028, with a total of 6.5 million ounces through 2039. Seems to be a win-win all round, as Newmont has some $5 billion in cash and can comfortably finance the sulfides project alone, while Buenaventura can focus on debt reduction and investing in its more modest internal project portfolio. Other financial news this week: Sabina Gold and Silver arranged a $520 million US financing package for the development of the Goose Mine at its Back River project in Nunavut in Canada, with Orion Mine Finance and Wheaton Precious Metals. The financing is comprised of a $225 million senior secured debt facility, a $75 million gold prepay facility, $125 million gold stream arrangement, and a $95 million private placement. Sabina plans to develop a 15-year open pit and underground operation at Goose to produce an average annual 223,000 ounces of gold for an initial capital expenditure of $466 million, with first pour targeting in the March quarter of 2025. Barrick Gold had a good news out this week. It replaced the depletion of its gold mineral reserves by 150% in 2021 before acquisition and equity changes at South Arturo and Porgera, and it improved its reserve grade by 3% while maintaining its $1,200 per ounce reserve price gold price assumption. Barrick's attributable, proven and probable mineral reserves now stand at 69 million ounces, grading 1.71 grams per ton, up from 68 million ounces, grading 1.66 grams per ton in 2020. Its attributable copper reserves are now 12 billion pounds, grading 0.38% copper, using a $2.75 per pound price assumption. A couple of economic studies out this week that were quite noticeable. Vista Gold published a feasibility for a 50,000 tonne per day operation at its Mount Todd gold project in the Northern Territory of Australia, which details average production of 395,000 ounces a year for 16 years and 479,000 ounces a year during the first 7 years, following an initial capital expenditure of $892 million US. The project would yield an after-tax net present value of almost $1 billion at a 5% discount rate and an internal rate of return of over 20% at a $1,600 gold price assumption, which increases to about 27% at spot prices. The company also reported a 19% increase in its reserves to almost 7 million ounces. The company is now looking for a development partner. And finally, in Idaho, Integra Resources announced a pre-feasibility study for its Dillamar Gold project for a two-stage 35,000 tons per day heap leach operation and 6,000 tons per day mill operation to produce an average of about 110,000 ounces of gold equivalent per year for 16 years, with the production of 163,000 ounces a year during the first 8 years. The project is expected to yield an internal rate of return of about 27% at $1,700 gold and $21.50 per ounce silver, which increases to 33% IRR at spot prices. The pre-production capital expenditure there is estimated at $282 million. And interestingly, the company focused on the sustainability aspects of the project, including using a railway light rail system as the ore haulage system rather than diesel haul trucks. And it plans to power the project through an on-site microgrid comprising a 12 megawatt solar array and a liquefied natural gas power generation plant, which will have lower emissions and lower costs. It is also considering the use of the Albion sulfide recovery process rather than pressure oxidization to enhance precious metals recovery.
There's a new number 3 gold miner officially on Tuesday. Agnico Eagle and Kirkland Lake officially merged. The combined company will be led by Sean Boyd as executive chair. Anthony McCooch, who was previously CEO of Kirkland Lake, will be chief executive officer. Hong Kong-based MMG is still having troubles with roadblocks at its La Bambas copper mine in Peru. Last year, it looked like the parties were coming to an agreement after MMG said that the mine would close in December. Now it's expecting that it will close in February because roadblocks have come up again. Las Bambas, we should remind, is one of the world's largest copper mines with an annual nameplate throughput of 51.1 million tons and annual production between 300 and 320,000 tons of copper concentrate. And nickel. This sounds like a headline from one of the gold miners from 2020. Russia's Norilsk Nickel reported gold financial numbers. The major nickel producer said that its net profit jumped 92% year on year to 6.974 million in 2021. That being up from 3.634 million. Shawn, I'd like to bring you back. Bring us up to date with Newfoundland. Could you just talk about briefly why there's been a kickoff in the region in the last couple of years?
Yeah, like Newfoundland really started taking traction after Newfound Gold made their Keats discovery. That was around, like it was something like 20 meters almost, or 19 some meters of 90 some grams there. So that really kind of launched everything. And then what they brought is the actual potential of the district. Everybody knows Newfoundland was a good place to explore, but most people were actually after base metals. And really, we haven't really seen a surge like this exploration since basically the 1988-89 era. And then that's when Noranda was kind of leading the charge, and these lake sediment sample maps had came out. And then people started kind of more or less hunting for gold in Newfoundland. But it kind of died down, and really what happened was most players that came to the table over the last 30 years kind of went back to the old showings. And what's gone on is a lot of research from the Newfoundland Geological Survey, and they kind of they put out some nice maps, but they started doing a lot of age dating on the basically various gold deposits and showings. And ironically, they all started, forming around from one end of the island to the other, for at least this center area, the dunnage zone, that they were all around the 410 million mark. Even the Marathon deposit, the Bay Vert, the Cape Ray area. So that's kind of what got me going in there, because that's when I realized this is a structural story. It's not lithology. And basically, if you got, pretty well all cracks were equal, but only people were kind of researching certain cracks. So that's what other people started catching on, and led to this big staking rush that over 120,000 claims staked within about a year and a half window there.
Paul?
Shawn, there's obviously been sort of activity in that region before, and in terms of the gold space, we've got Atlantic Gold and Marathon Gold. Why didn't things really kick off after those two companies, got their projects and advanced their projects? Why was Newfound Gold the trigger, do you think?
Well, Newfound Gold brought the grade, and what happened was, this is exactly what happened was, most of these deposits were found in the 80s, like 88 and 89. Literally, that was the era. And then when flow-through crashed in 89, all the juniors kind of left the island, and even Noranda closed their kind of gold exploration and kind of went back into base metals by 1990. But literally, I was able to kind of walk right up to some of these deposits, known deposits, and stake within 1.5 kilometers. And nobody's actually ever soil sampled outside of these windows. So that's what was kind of unique on the island was, I come from the Timmins camp where a good drill hole within 3 days, you've staked 3 miles out, and by day 5 it's 5 miles out. Here you were able to cuddle up to these deposits that people had worked or exhausted. But it was the Newfound Gold that actually hit some nice high grade, and they kind of kept hitting some, and it's continuing on. They're following this Keats. And that's the cool part about Newfoundland. It's the structures, and they go for kilometers. And that's what Marathon Gold has proven. They're tapping over 4 million ounces, and they're on about an 18-kilometer structure. So these structures that do produce, they may not be big deposits in one spot, but they're pearls on a string. And that's what the hunt is now on for.
Thank you.
Shawn, what's the infrastructure and the community relations like in Newfoundland?
It's actually like I'm used to working in the Yukon where we're remote there, but here remote is 10 miles off the road and 10 miles from a high powered transmission line. Like there's roads to 70% of the projects. It's kind of so it's kind of a dream for and for me as a prospector, you don't have to find the Yukon. You got to get 2 to 3 million ounces to put it into production. Here, that's what we're starting to see is these maritime guys are putting stuff in 600,000-700,000 ounces and putting it into production. Labrador Gold is looking at 800,000 ounces. And so these are the Australian guys putting these, basically sub-million ounce stuff into production. But what's nice about it is they're economical because the grade's there. And then they could use then they could finance the exploration to look for more deposits on their package of land. So
some of the top players right now and some of the top headlines, or I should say some of the top milestones that you're looking for over the next 12 months out of Newfoundland, Shawn?
Well, now we hope that Newfound Gold keeps the flag waving high with their high grade hits. And, they're planning to drill 400,000 meters. So there's a lot of drilling to be done. And then the next project tied onto that, that's Lab Gold. That's the project that I optioned out to them. And they've got about 100,000 meters in the queue to drill. So those guys are chasing the good targets. They're on to these, I call them, they're waving the flag pretty high. But last year we launched between I staked 30,000 claims and parceled it out to 5 different juniors. And we did last year about 80,000 soils. So it's these big regional greenfields exploration. And then this year, the results are piling in as we speak right now. That should all be in within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So now we'll have to go in and continue on. This year, it'll probably be about 125,000 soils because we're going to start gridding the targets that we started picking up now. So they're about a year behind, but they'll start probably drilling by late this fall coming up in early 2023.
Let's turn to inflation and costs. I'm glad to have you on, Shawn, because we've heard a lot from miners talking about getting compressed margins with what they're doing, whether it's going to be explosives costs, whether it's going to be fuel costs on labor. Let's just talk about supplies work. If you're somebody that's an explorer, what's it like getting supplies to do your work?
It's it's the labor, right? That's been the big hang up, or at least, trying to find just an example this year already from a diamond drilling, the cost went up, the new contracts coming in, they're up 20% compared to last year. But it's every sector, whether you're looking for a cook, a pad builder, a diamond driller, all these, we ran out of all of these people. And I kind of think this is, but it's not just our business, but I think our business got hit a little bit harder because we've been, most of the people staying in our business have been kind of lifers, but what we're starting to edge this pandemic kind of put a lot of people into retirement. They said, time to retire, that were hanging on in their late 50s, early 60s. But our biggest problem right now is to find a geologist. that's, his mid 40s with some experience, because that person's probably gone through 2 downturns so far, and their partner told them to get a real job. And now they're school teachers. So we got all these young folks coming up with not too much experience. So it's kind of a balance here. But, like last year, they were paying diamond drillers for a 12-hour shift up to $1,100. Like we're talking like these guys could command it, because who's going to replace them? So that's what we're into, that pinch. But even from helicopter pilots, like stats like that are basically, we're running short of key people.
Paul?
In terms of Newfoundland specifically, it's not remote. So does that make it a little bit easier to get people? People don't have to necessarily fly in, fly out. There's towns where they can stay and live. And of course, there's the local population as well, which has obviously been involved in mining for many, many generations. I imagine they like the fact that they can work much closer to home than perhaps flying to the other side of Canada.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there is roads, so we don't have to use helicopters as much. But this is what happened last year, trying to find a pickup truck, to rent a pickup truck on the island. You couldn't rent one. And then some guy showed up at the beginning of last year's season from the States and bought all the secondhand used vehicles on the island and shipped them off. So you couldn't actually even go buy a secondhand truck last year. Like, it was wild. So we had to go to Nova Scotia and Halifax to find pickup trucks. Yeah, so it's kind of like it's kind of interesting, but it is nice. They're it is one of the greatest spots to explore, and because you could rent houses, and there's cabins in the bush everywhere, because they love their cabins there. So they rent you their cabins close to the work site. So yeah, so it's kind of so we're just getting our feet wet on the island last year in a big way, because we're exploring from one end of the island to the other. But no, it's a great spot, and that's what I'm hoping, that if we do find deposits, all the miners, like that's the biggest exporter of the Newfoundland is miners, and they'll be glad to come home to work.
Excellent. Talking about your labor shortage, Shawn, which is fun, is that you're an inventor and you're a tinkerer. You're always trying new types of technology that can be applied. If you're seeing this squeeze from labor, do you see any ways that people are actually able to maybe invest in a little bit more technology and then automate something that they hadn't automated before?
Well, this is we're trying to, but like we use now LiDAR. I think everybody's into LiDAR, but LiDAR is a good way to basically understand the ground. So, that helps from, instead of putting a geologist hunting for outcrops, you could actually see them with the LiDAR quite nicely. But it's these kind of tweaks that we're trying to get, but we still got to get to the ground. You could use drone for geophysics. They're using that, but so it's kind of, but we're still back to eventually we have to put boots on the ground. And a good guy with boots, or a good person with field experience, it's hard to come by. And that's what finds the deposits really at the back end here. So,
are young people getting interested in getting into the field?
It is, but there's a group of people that, so we have to accommodate people that, you can't send them in there for 2 months or 6 weeks. They want 3 weeks in, 2 weeks out, or a week out. Like when I started the business 30 years ago, you go into the field in the Arctic for 3 or 4 months sometimes without coming out. Now, you have to have internet, you have to have so you have to have all these things. Otherwise, you're not going to get workers. So you got to accommodate, but it's kind of interesting. I heard a good one the other day, that a new geo coming out, or not that new, but new enough, going, I don't want to go to the field. And so this is, he just wants to work on the computer with the data. So it's kind of an interesting time here.
Let's turn to our number of the week. Shawn, guest always goes first. Could you tell us what your number is?
For which one? What kind of number?
Oh, sorry. You had an interesting number just regarding helicopters right now and just availability.
Okay, yeah. So that's the stats of the week is 2 years ago, there was 2,800 helicopter pilots registered in Canada for Transport Canada. Last year, there was 1,200. And so when you look at them stats, you could see what's kind of going on in the squeeze we're hitting.
I'm worried about my backcountry skiing, Shawn. Thank you for the number. Paul, what's your number of the week?
My number is 931. And to be more precise, 931 million US dollars. That's the investment spree that Wheaton Precious Metals has been on since December. In that time, the combined capital deployment of its main rivals, Franco-Nevada and Royal Gold, is zip.
I have a status number, 1,000. Indonesia has suspended the operations of more than 1,000 coal miners, tin miners, and other minerals, reportedly over the failure of being able to submit work plans in 2022. That number coming from Reuters and picked up by BMO. In 2014, Indonesia banned the export of nickel, forcing miners to process or domestically. So Indonesia taking a statist approach and controlling what's happening in mining. That's it for me. Is there any news over the next 12 months that we should look for from what you're involved with, Shawn?
Yeah, like we should have a lot of what I'm hoping to bring to the table in Newfoundland is new discoveries that are being made from all these big soil geochemistry programs. And like we did this in the Yukon, so it's just starting to ramp up, and it's kind of like lotto pull tabs, because that's what you're playing as a probability game. And the more regional soils that we're doing on these key structures, that should lead to new discoveries. And then hopefully by next fall, we'll be actually starting to drill these things with these lightweight RAB drills, which should, fuel the fire even more. That Newfoundland it's a real spot, and it's a unique spot in Canada to go and explore.
Follow me at Michael McCrae. That's MCCRAE. Niels is at Niels_C. Paul is at CGS 2021 Gold. Shawn Ryan, how would you like people to get a hold of you?
Basically, my email is sryan@ryanwoodexploration.com.
If you like what you hear, tell a friend, and don't forget to subscribe. On behalf of Paul Harris, Shawn Ryan, and myself, have a pleasant weekend.